My cousin sold my grandmother's ring that she left me and claimed it was lost, so I tracked down the buyer and exposed her theft at our family reunion. Family heirlooms are supposed to connect us to our loved ones' memories, not become opportunities for greedy relatives to steal from each other. My cousin Angela thought she could sell my grandmother's precious ring and convince everyone it was lost during the estate cleanup. What she didn't know was that I'd been tracking the ring's whereabouts for months, and that our annual family reunion would be the perfect venue to expose her theft in front of everyone who loved Grandma Rose. I'm Isabella Chen, 26, and my grandmother Rose was the heart of our large extended family. She passed away last year at 89, leaving behind not just heartbroken relatives, but also a collection of beautiful jewelry that she'd carefully designated for specific family members in her will. The most precious piece was Grandma's engagement ring, a stunning 1940s Art Deco design with a 2-carat diamond surrounded by sapphires that had been in our family for 3 generations. Grandma had always told me that ring would be mine someday, and she'd officially left it to me in her will along with a handwritten note explaining its family history. "Isabella, this ring represents the love story of our family," Grandma had written. "Your great-grandfather saved for 2 years to buy this for your great-grandmother, and it's been passed down to the oldest granddaughter in each generation. I know you'll treasure it and continue the tradition." The ring wasn't just valuable monetarily. It was priceless as a family heirloom that connected me to generations of strong women who'd worn it before me. My cousin Angela, who was 31 and Grandma's other granddaughter from my uncle's side of the family, had always been jealous that the ring was destined for me instead of her. Angela was 5 years older, but had always been irresponsible with money and relationships, while I'd been Grandma's constant companion and caregiver during her final years. Grandma had made her decision about the ring based on our different personalities and life circumstances, but Angela had never accepted it gracefully. "It's not fair that Isabella gets the most valuable piece just because she's the oldest granddaughter," Angela had complained to family members over the years. "I'm older than her, and I've been part of this family longer." But Grandma's will was clear and legally binding. The ring was mine, along with specific instructions about keeping it in the family and eventually passing it to the next generation of women. The problem started immediately after Grandma's funeral, when we began the process of distributing her belongings according to her will. Angela volunteered to help clean out Grandma's house and organize her jewelry collection for distribution to family members. She seemed eager to be helpful and claimed she wanted to make sure everyone received their designated items properly. "I'll take care of sorting through Grandma's jewelry box and making sure everything gets to the right people," Angela offered. "I know how important these pieces are to everyone, and I want to handle them with the respect they deserve." I was grateful for Angela's help because I was dealing with my own grief and the overwhelming process of settling Grandma's estate. It seemed natural that Angela, as another granddaughter, would want to ensure that Grandma's jewelry was distributed according to her wishes. That was my first mistake, trusting Angela with access to items she'd always coveted. A week after Angela took possession of Grandma's jewelry collection for sorting, she called me with devastating news. "Isabella, I'm so sorry, but there's been a terrible accident," she said, sounding genuinely distressed. "While I was organizing Grandma's jewelry, the engagement ring somehow went missing. I've searched everywhere, but I can't find it." My heart stopped. "What do you mean it went missing? How does a ring just disappear?" "I had all the jewelry spread out on Grandma's dining room table, organizing it by recipient," Angela explained. "I stepped away for maybe 20 minutes to answer the door for a delivery, and when I came back, the ring was gone. I rushed over to Grandma's house immediately to help search for the ring. We spent hours looking through every room, checking under furniture, going through drawers, even searching outside in case the ring had somehow been dropped. But we found nothing." Angela seemed as upset as I was about the missing ring, crying and apologizing repeatedly for letting this happen while the jewelry was in her care. "Isabella, I feel terrible about this," she sobbed. "I know how much that ring meant to you and to Grandma. I should have been more careful with something so precious." We filed a police report about the missing ring, and Angela even offered to pay for a private investigator to help find it. She seemed genuinely devastated by the loss and was doing everything possible to help recover the family heirloom. But something about the situation bothered me, even though I couldn't put my finger on what felt wrong. The timing was suspicious. The ring had disappeared during the only period when Angela had unsupervised access to it. The story about stepping away for a delivery didn't quite make sense, because Grandma's house was in a secure building where deliveries required buzzing visitors up from the lobby. Most concerning was that only the engagement ring had disappeared. Angela had been sorting through dozens of pieces of valuable jewelry, but the thief had somehow taken only the most precious item, the one piece that Angela had always resented not inheriting herself. I started paying closer attention to Angela's behavior and noticed inconsistencies in her story about the missing ring. She'd initially said she was gone for maybe 20 minutes, but later changed it to just a few minutes. She couldn't remember what the delivery was for or which company had made it. And when I asked to see the security footage from Grandma's building, Angela said she'd already checked, and the cameras hadn't captured anything useful. But when I contacted the building management myself, they told me that Angela had never asked to review any security footage. Angela was lying about details of the ring's disappearance, and I was starting to suspect that she knew more about what had happened to it than she was admitting. That's when I decided to conduct my own investigation into the missing ring. I started by researching where someone might sell a valuable antique ring if they wanted to convert it to cash quickly. Estate jewelry could be sold through pawn shops, jewelry stores, online marketplaces, or auction houses. I visited every pawn shop and jewelry store within 50 miles of our city, providing descriptions of Grandma's ring and asking if anyone had tried to sell a piece matching that description. Most shops hadn't seen anything like it, but the owner of one upscale jewelry store remembered a ring that sounded very similar to Grandma's engagement ring. A young woman brought in an Art Deco ring with a large diamond and sapphires about 6 weeks ago, the jeweler told me. Beautiful piece, probably from the 1940s. She said it was a family heirloom that she needed to sell for financial reasons. My heart was pounding. Do you remember what the woman looked like? The jeweler described someone who matched Angela's appearance perfectly. Brunette hair, medium height, around 30 years old, well-dressed, but seemed nervous about the transaction. She had all the proper documentation showing that the ring belonged to her, the jeweler continued. Said it was left to her by her grandmother and that she had the legal right to sell it. I asked if the jeweler still had any records of the transaction or contact information for the seller. He checked his files and found a receipt with Angela's name and phone number. Angela had sold Grandma's ring to this jewelry store 6 weeks ago, just 2 weeks after claiming it had been stolen from Grandma's house. But the discovery got even more damaging when the jeweler showed me the documentation Angela had provided to prove her right to sell the ring. She'd forged a will that named her as the recipient of the engagement ring, instead of me. Angela had created fake legal documents to support her theft and sale of my inheritance. The jeweler still had the ring because he'd been trying to authenticate its provenance before putting it up for sale. When I showed him Grandma's real will, proving that the ring had been left to me, he was shocked to learn that he'd unknowingly purchased stolen property. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I had no idea this woman had forged documents to sell a ring that didn't belong to her. I'll return the ring to you immediately and pursue legal action against her for fraud." I was relieved to recover Grandma's ring, but I was also furious that Angela had stolen my inheritance and then played the role of concerned cousin, helping to search for the missing family heirloom. Angela had deliberately betrayed my trust and stolen something precious to me, then put on an elaborate performance of grief and sympathy to cover up her crime. But I wasn't satisfied with just getting the ring back. Angela needed to face consequences for her theft and fraud, and our family needed to know what kind of person she really was. Our annual family reunion was scheduled for the following month, a 3-day gathering where all of Grandma's children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren would come together to celebrate family and remember loved ones we'd lost. It would be the perfect venue to expose Angela's theft in front of everyone who loved Grandma and would be horrified to learn that one of her own granddaughters had stolen from her estate. I spent the weeks leading up to the reunion gathering evidence and preparing my presentation. I had the jewelry store receipt showing Angela's sale of the ring, copies of her forged documents, the security footage from the jewelry store showing her conducting the transaction, and testimony from the jeweler about her fraudulent claims. I also consulted with a lawyer about pressing criminal charges against Angela for theft, fraud, and forgery. The attorney confirmed that Angela had committed multiple felonies and could face serious prison time if prosecuted, but I wanted to give Angela one chance to confess and make things right with the family before involving law enforcement. The family reunion was held at a lake house that had been rented for the weekend. About 40 family members attended, including Grandma's 4 children, 12 grandchildren, and various great-grandchildren and spouses. On Saturday evening, we held our traditional memorial service, where family members shared stories about relatives we'd lost and talked about the importance of preserving family traditions and heirlooms. Angela participated actively in the memorial, talking about how much she missed Grandma and how important it was to honor her memory by taking care of the precious items she'd left to family members. Grandma Rose would be heartbroken to know that her beautiful engagement ring was lost during the estate settlement, Angela said with fake sadness. That ring represented 3 generations of love in our family, and losing it feels like losing a part of Grandma herself. She was literally giving a speech about the tragedy of the lost ring while knowing she'd stolen and sold it herself. That's when I decided it was time to reveal the truth. I stood up and asked for everyone's attention. I need to share some important information about Grandma's engagement ring that everyone should know. Angela looked confused but not worried. She had no idea that I'd discovered her theft. 6 weeks ago, Angela told me that Grandma's engagement ring had been stolen while she was sorting jewelry at Grandma's house, I began. She seemed devastated by the loss and helped me search for the missing ring. Nods and murmurs of sympathy from family members who remembered Angela's distress about the lost heirloom. But last month, I discovered that the ring wasn't stolen by a stranger, I continued. It was stolen by Angela herself, who sold it to a jewelry store using forged documents that falsely claimed she had inherited it. Gasps and shocked expressions throughout the room. Angela went white and started shaking her head frantically. That's not true, she protested. Isabella, why are you making up these horrible lies about me? I pulled out my folder of evidence. I have the jewelry store receipt showing that you sold the ring 6 weeks ago. I have copies of the forged will you created to claim ownership. I have security footage of you conducting the transaction. And I have testimony from the jeweler about the fraud you committed. I began distributing copies of the evidence to family members who examined the documents with growing horror and anger. Angela sold our grandmother's engagement ring for $8,000 and then spent 2 months pretending to help me search for it while acting heartbroken about its loss, I announced. Uncle Paul, Angela's father, was staring at the evidence in disbelief. Angela, please tell me this isn't true. Please tell me you didn't steal from your grandmother's estate. Angela tried to deny everything, claiming I'd fabricated the evidence because I was jealous of her, or trying to frame her for some reason. But the documentation was overwhelming and verified by multiple sources. She's lying, Angela screamed. I never sold any ring. This is all fake. That's when I held up Grandma's engagement ring, which I'd recovered from the jewelry store. This is Grandma's ring, which I got back from the jeweler who unknowingly purchased it from you, I said. He's prepared to testify about your fraud and has agreed to cooperate with criminal prosecution. The room erupted in angry voices and demands for explanation. Family members were horrified that Angela had stolen from Grandma's estate and then lied to everyone's faces while pretending to help search for the missing ring. Angela's mother was crying. Uncle Paul was shouting at his daughter about dishonoring the family, and Grandma's other children were expressing disgust about Angela's betrayal of trust. How could you steal from your own grandmother's estate? Aunt Maria demanded. How could you look Isabella in the eye and pretend to help search for something you'd stolen yourself? Angela finally broke down and admitted to selling the ring, but she tried to justify her theft by claiming she needed the money and that the ring should have been left to her instead of me. I'm older than Isabella, and I've been struggling financially, she sobbed. It wasn't fair that Grandma left the most valuable piece to her just because she's the oldest granddaughter. Angela, Grandma left that ring to Isabella because she earned it by being a devoted granddaughter, Uncle Paul said angrily. You had no right to steal it and sell it behind everyone's back. The family was united in their condemnation of Angela's theft and fraud. Everyone was disgusted by her betrayal of Grandma's trust and her willingness to steal from her own cousin's inheritance. But I wasn't finished exposing the full extent of Angela's deception. There's something else everyone should know, I said. When Angela sold the ring, she told the jeweler that she was struggling with financial difficulties and needed to sell family heirlooms to pay bills. I pulled out Angela's social media posts from the weeks after she'd sold the ring, showing expensive vacations, designer purchases, and luxury experiences that she'd funded with the proceeds from stealing Grandma's ring. Angela used the $8,000 from selling Grandma's engagement ring to take a vacation to Hawaii and buy designer handbags, I announced. She didn't sell our family heirloom because of financial necessity. She sold it to fund a luxury lifestyle. The family was even more outraged to learn that Angela had used the proceeds from her theft for frivolous purchases rather than genuine financial emergencies. Angela was sobbing and begging for forgiveness, claiming she'd made a terrible mistake and promising to pay back the money she'd received from selling the ring. But the damage was done. Angela had lost the trust and respect of her entire extended family through her theft, fraud, and months of deceptive behavior. The immediate consequences for Angela were severe and lasting. Uncle Paul told Angela that she was no longer welcome in his house and that he was ashamed to call her his daughter. He kicked her out of the family reunion that night and told her not to contact him until she'd made full restitution and faced legal consequences for her crimes. The extended family voted to exclude Angela from all future family gatherings until she'd made amends for her theft and proven that she could be trusted again. Most painfully for Angela, Grandma's children decided to review all the other jewelry distributions to make sure Angela hadn't stolen additional items during her access to the estate. But I also followed through on pressing criminal charges against Angela for her theft and fraud. The criminal case resulted in Angela being convicted of grand theft, fraud, and forgery. She was sentenced to 18 months in jail and ordered to pay restitution for the full appraised value of the ring, plus penalties and court costs. Angela's criminal record made her unemployable in her field of real estate sales, destroying the career she'd built over several years. Her reputation in our community was ruined when news of her conviction spread among family friends and professional associates. Most devastatingly, Angela's theft destroyed her relationships with family members who'd always loved and supported her. She went from being a cherished member of our extended family to being someone most relatives wanted nothing to do with. The civil consequences were equally severe. Angela had to sell her house and car to pay the restitution and legal fees from her criminal case. She also faced a wrongful conversion lawsuit that I filed to recover additional damages for the emotional distress and costs associated with her theft and fraud. Some family members initially suggested that I was being too harsh by pressing criminal charges against my own cousin instead of handling the situation within the family. But Angela had committed serious crimes that went far beyond simple family disputes. She'd stolen my inheritance, forged legal documents, lied to law enforcement, and deceived our entire family for months while pretending to help search for something she'd stolen herself. Angela's theft wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a calculated scheme that required planning, forgery, and systematic deception over many weeks. By pressing charges, I ensured that Angela faced appropriate consequences for her crimes, and that other family members were protected from potential future theft. The prosecution also sent a clear message that family relationships don't excuse criminal behavior, and that stealing family heirlooms has serious legal consequences. Angela learned that being part of a family comes with responsibilities and trust that can't be violated without facing severe consequences. She also learned that some people are too thorough and too determined to let thieves get away with stealing precious family heirlooms. 2 years later, I'm happily wearing Grandma's engagement ring and planning to continue the family tradition of passing it to the next generation of women in our family. Angela is still dealing with the consequences of her theft, probation requirements, restitution payments, and social isolation from the family she betrayed. The ring she stole for $8,000 to fund a luxury vacation cost her over $50,000 in legal fees, restitution, and penalties, plus her relationships with family members who'd always loved her. Meanwhile, our family gatherings are more peaceful and trusting, without someone who was willing to steal from her own grandmother's estate and lie to everyone about it. Angela's theft lasted about 6 weeks from crime to discovery. Her consequences will last for years. I think Grandma would be proud that I fought to protect her precious ring and made sure that family heirlooms are treated with the respect they deserve. Sometimes the best way to honor someone's memory is to make sure the people who would steal from their legacy face appropriate consequences. Angela got exactly what she deserved. Nothing but consequences. And Grandma's ring got exactly what it deserved. Protection and continued family tradition by someone who truly values its history and meaning. The cousin who stole my inheritance ended up losing everything she'd built in her own life. That's what I call perfect justice for Grandma Rose.